My girlfriend told me, "You'll fund my dream business. I'll keep all the profit." I smiled and said, "I understood." Then I registered the trademark myself. She found out when investors called me. I, 32M, thought I'd found the one. After 3 years together, I believed we were building something real. Turned out, I was just building her empire while she was planning my exit. The conversation happened on a Tuesday evening in our apartment. We were sitting on the couch, her laptop open between us, showing sketches and mock-ups of what she called her revolutionary sustainable fashion brand. She had been talking about this for months, refining the concept, the name, the branding. Everything was perfect, she said. Everything except the funding. She told me she needed $80,000 to launch properly. Not a loan, she clarified. An investment in our future. I asked what kind of return I'd see on that investment, trying to keep my tone light, supportive. That's when her expression changed. She said I wouldn't see returns in the traditional sense. The business would be entirely hers, in her name, her ownership. She explained that I'd be funding it as her partner, as someone who believed in her dreams. The profits would stay with her because she was the creative force, the visionary. I was just the financial backing. I sat there processing what she'd just laid out so casually. I asked if she was serious. She said completely serious. She reminded me that I made good money as a software architect and that this was what partners did for each other. She'd supported me emotionally through my career struggles, she said, so this was my way of supporting her ambitions. When I pointed out that emotional support and $80,000 weren't exactly equivalent, she got defensive. She said if I truly loved her, I wouldn't be keeping score. I smiled and told her I understood. I said I needed a few days to think about the logistics and maybe talk to my financial advisor. She seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to scrolling through her designs, talking excitedly about launch timelines and influencer marketing strategies. What she didn't know was that I'd heard this pitch before. Not from her, but from my cousin who got cleaned out by a similar scheme 5 years ago. Different relationship, same playbook. I wasn't going to be that guy. The brand name she'd chosen was distinctive, something catchy and memorable. Over the next week, while she was busy meeting with her designer friends and scouting manufacturing contacts, I did some research. The trademark was available. Nobody had registered it yet. She'd been so focused on the creative side that she hadn't bothered with the legal groundwork. I registered it myself. The whole process took about 10 days with expedited filing. Cost me less than $2,000. I didn't tell her. I just continued our normal routine, listening to her refine her pitch, watching her create mood boards and product lines, all branded with a name that was now legally mine. She brought up the money again 2 weeks later. She said she'd found the perfect manufacturer and had meetings lined up with potential investors, but she needed to show them I was committed first. It would give her credibility, she explained. She wanted me to transfer $40,000 up front, with the rest coming in the next quarter. I told her I was still reviewing my finances. She pressed harder. She said opportunities like this didn't wait and that I was being unnecessarily cautious. I smiled again and said I just wanted to make sure everything was done right. Another week passed. Then the first call came. She was in the shower when her phone rang. I saw it was a number with an investment firm's name on the caller ID. I didn't answer, but I knew what was happening. She'd been reaching out to investors, pitching her brand, probably using projections and plans she'd created assuming my money was guaranteed. The investor called me directly 2 days later. He'd done his due diligence. When looking into the trademark status for the brand name, my name came up as the registered owner. He wanted to clarify the ownership structure before proceeding with any meetings. I told him the brand was indeed mine, that I was the sole owner of all intellectual property, and that I was currently exploring various business models before bringing on any partners or investors. He thanked me for the clarity and said he'd be interested in discussing opportunities once I had my structure finalized. She found out that evening. I came home from work to find her standing in the living room, her laptop open, her face red. She asked me if I'd registered her trademark. I confirmed that I had. She started yelling immediately, asking how I could betray her like that, how I could steal her idea. I stayed calm and reminded her that an idea isn't theft when it hasn't been legally protected. I'd simply secured intellectual property that was available to anyone. She said it was her concept, her designs, her vision. I agreed that the designs were hers, but the brand name, the trademark, the legal entity, those were mine. She demanded I sign it over to her immediately. I said I'd consider it under certain conditions. She asked what conditions. I told her I'd transfer the trademark if she paid me $80,000 for it. She went quiet. The math had suddenly reversed, and she understood exactly what I'd done. She called me petty and vindictive. I told her I was being exactly as fair as she'd planned to be with me. The argument lasted for hours. She cycled through anger, tears, and then back to anger. She said I'd ruined everything, that investors were now confused, that her manufacturer needed clarity on ownership before moving forward with samples. I listened to all of it without raising my voice. When she finally exhausted herself, I made my position clear. She'd wanted me to fund her dream with no stake, no return, no ownership. I declined in my own way. If she wanted the trademark, she could buy it. If she wanted to start a different business with a different name, I wished her luck. But I wasn't going to be her bank account while she built something that excluded me. She moved out 3 days later, packed her things while I was at work, and left her key on the counter. I figured that was the end of it. Update 1. It wasn't the end. 2 weeks after she moved out, I got contacted by one of the investors she'd been courting. He wanted to discuss a potential partnership. He'd seen her pitch deck, liked the business model, but was more interested now that he understood I controlled the brand assets. He asked if I was open to developing the concept with proper backing and structure. I told him I was interested in hearing more. We met for coffee. He brought a colleague. They'd both been in the sustainable fashion space for years and saw genuine potential in the brand positioning she'd created. But they also saw the red flags in how she'd approached the business structure. They asked about my background. I explained I was a software architect, not a fashion expert, but I understood business development and IP protection. They seemed to respect that. They asked if I had the original designs and concepts. I said I didn't, that those belonged to my ex-girlfriend. They nodded and said that was fair, but the brand name was the real asset anyway. They asked what I wanted to do with it. I admitted I hadn't planned beyond protecting myself. I hadn't thought about actually building the business. But sitting there, listening to them talk about market opportunities and sustainable supply chains, something shifted. Why shouldn't I build it? The name was mine. I could hire designers. I could bring on people who knew manufacturing. I didn't need her. I told them I was open to exploring a partnership if they were serious. They were. Over the next month, we structured a deal. They'd bring industry expertise and connections. I'd contribute the trademark and brand assets. We'd bring on a design team and a proper operations manager. Nobody would own the majority alone. It would be a real business with real equity distribution. My ex found out because apparently we still had mutual friends who couldn't resist telling her. She called me from an unknown number. She was beyond angry. She said I was stealing her life's work, that I was deliberately sabotaging her future. I reminded her that she'd wanted me to fund her life's work with zero stake in it. I'd simply changed the terms. If she'd been willing to offer me genuine partnership from the start, we'd probably be building this together. Instead, she tried to use me as a resource. I declined. She threatened legal action. I told her to speak to my lawyer. She didn't have grounds for anything, and she probably knew it. You can't sue someone for protecting an available trademark, especially when you never had legal rights to it yourself. She hung up. The business launched 4 months later. We hired a talented designer who brought fresh perspective to the sustainable fashion concept. The product line wasn't identical to what my ex had envisioned, but it captured the same market positioning. The brand did well. Not spectacularly, but steadily. We got into several boutiques and built a decent online presence. By the end of the first year, we were profitable. I ran into her about 14 months after our breakup. She was with someone new at a restaurant downtown. We made eye contact. She looked like she wanted to say something, but I just nodded politely and kept walking. I didn't need to gloat or explain. The business existed. She didn't have any part of it. That was statement enough. Update 2. The real twist came almost 2 years after everything started. I got an email from a legal firm representing my ex-girlfriend. At first, I thought it was another empty threat about the trademark, but it wasn't. She was claiming copyright infringement on design elements. Apparently, she'd kept detailed records of all her original sketches and concepts, and she was alleging that our product line had copied her work. I forwarded everything to our business lawyer immediately. He reviewed her claims and our current designs. His assessment was that we were in a gray area. While we hadn't directly copied her sketches, some of the aesthetic principles and design language were similar enough that a court might see influence. Not theft, but influence. The question was whether that influence rose to the level of copyright infringement. We had three options: fight it in court, settle financially, or cease production on the contested designs. Fighting would be expensive and drag out for years. Settling felt like giving in to someone who tried to exploit me in the first place. Ceasing production would hurt the business but wouldn't destroy it. I talked to my business partners. They were frustrated but pragmatic. They suggested we offer a settlement that was reasonable but not excessive. $50,000, with an NDA attached. She'd get money, we'd get certainty, and nobody would admit wrongdoing. I hated the idea of paying her anything, but I understood the business logic. Her lawyer countered with $200,000. We countered with $75,000. They came back with $150,000. We held at $80,000. Eventually, they agreed to $90,000 with the NDA. I signed the papers feeling like I'd lost something, even though the business was still intact. But here's what made it worth it. The NDA went both ways. She couldn't talk about the settlement, the business, or her involvement in the original concept. When she tried posting vague accusations on social media a few months later, our lawyer sent a cease and desist. She deleted everything. Her online presence regarding the brand vanished. Meanwhile, our business kept growing. We expanded into a second product line that was entirely our own design language. We brought on a creative director who had no connection to her whatsoever. The brand evolved beyond anything she'd originally conceived. 3 years after that initial conversation on the couch, I attended a trade show for sustainable fashion brands. Our booth was positioned well, and we had strong foot traffic. I saw her walk past with a badge indicating she was attending as a freelance designer. She saw our setup, saw the brand name, saw me standing there talking to potential buyers. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds. Then she turned and walked in a different direction. I didn't feel victorious exactly. I felt something quieter than that. I felt like I'd protected myself from someone who'd viewed me as a resource rather than a partner. The business success was secondary to that. Sure, it was satisfying to build something real from a situation that could have destroyed me financially. But the real win was recognizing the dynamic before it was too late. The relationship had taught me what partnership actually meant. It wasn't about grand gestures or supporting someone's dreams unconditionally. It was about mutual respect, shared risk, and equitable stakes. She'd wanted a patron, not a partner. I'd wanted an equal, not a dependent. When those wants didn't align, the relationship was already over. The trademark was just the catalyst that made it obvious. Looking back, I wonder sometimes if things could have been different. If she'd approached me honestly from the start, proposed a real partnership with shared ownership and shared risk, would I have said yes? Probably. I'd loved her, or thought I had. I'd wanted to support her ambitions. But she'd framed it as my obligation rather than our opportunity. That framing revealed everything I needed to know about how she saw me. The business is still running. I'm less involved now in the day-to-day operations. We have a strong team, and my partners handle most of the strategic decisions. I focus on my actual career as a software architect, which is where my real skills lie anyway. The fashion brand became something I'm proud of, but it was never my passion. It was my insurance policy that happened to become profitable. I'm in a new relationship now. She knows the whole story. She thinks I was smart, maybe a little ruthless, but ultimately self-protective. She's a patent attorney, which is fitting. We talk about intellectual property and business structures, sometimes over dinner. It sounds boring, but it's the kind of boring that means we understand each other's values. We've discussed starting a business together someday, something completely different. If we do, it'll be structured fairly from day one, with everything in writing and nothing left to assumption. That's what I learned from all of this. Love doesn't mean surrender. Partnership doesn't mean sacrifice without return. And when someone shows you they see you as a means to an end, believe them the first time. I smiled and said I understood because I did understand. I understood exactly what she was proposing, and I understood that my only move was to protect myself before she could use me up. The trademark wasn't revenge. It was recognition. And everything that followed was just the natural consequence of refusing to be someone's stepping stone. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe and hype button would mean the world to us. Please subscribe and press the hype button. Thanks in advance.